plan to spawn.
Peekaboo.
Outside of Marvel and DC, it's actually pretty hard to point to a comic book superhero who's had as much of an impact as Spawn. Todd McFarlane, who was already a huge deal in comics thanks to his time at Marvel, came up with the character back in the early 1990s. Spawn wasn't just another comic, it was one of the big titles that helped launch Image Comics, which McFarlane co-founded. And the thing is, Spawn was such a hit that the comic series hasn't stopped running even now, decades later. At one point, the character even made it to the big screen with a live-action movie in 1997 produced by New Line Cinema. But here's the catch. The movie didn't exactly impress critics or audiences. It bombed, both critically and commercially, which made McFarlane super protective of the character. Because of that, he basically kept the idea of another movie locked up for years, not really willing to risk another failure. It wasn't until around 2009 that he even started seriously entertaining the idea of a reboot. By 2016, though, things looked promising. McFarlane revealed he'd written a script for a brand new Spawn movie. The following year, Blumhouse Productions, famous for horror hits, joined the project, and McFarlane was set not just to write but also to direct. It sounded exciting at the time, but that's also when the long, messy ride through development hell officially began. Recently, McFarlane showed up at San Diego Comic-Con 2025 with a small but important update. He told comicbook.com that the movie is still alive, and now they're even in talks with an A-list director. The bad news is, nothing's confirmed. The good news is there's still hope. Since it's been such a roller coaster, let's actually walk through how this project has played out over the years. Back in 2017, McFarlane really started hyping things up. That May, just before San Diego Comic-Con, he revealed that his script was finished, and even though he'd never directed anything before, he was firm about wanting creative control, and surprisingly, Blumhouse was okay with that. By July, McFarlane was already describing his version of Spawn as a low-budget, R-rated horror movie. He compared it more to Jaws than a typical superhero flick. Instead of focusing directly on Spawn, he wanted Twitch, a detective from the comics, to take center stage. Spawn himself would be more like the monster lurking in the shadows, similar to how the shark in Jaws wasn't always on screen. Later that year, Jason Blum publicly backed McFarlane, saying he believed in his vision as a director. Around the same time, McFarlane clarified what R-rated meant to him. He didn't want something cheeky or comedic like Deadpool. Instead, he wanted it dark, grim, and serious, and he claimed the movie would be shot on a small budget, maybe $10 million tops. Then came 2018, which was a big year because actual stars started circling the project. In May, Jamie Foxx was announced as the lead, playing Al Simmons, the soldier who becomes Spawn. By July, Jeremy Renner was in talks to play Twitch, the detective. That was some serious star power, and it gave fans hope that the project was moving forward fast. Around that time, McFarlane also tossed out the idea of a crossover with Venom, especially since he'd co-created the character back in Marvel. He thought that if Sony ever distributed Spawn, maybe Spawn and Venom could even meet on screen one day. And the momentum didn't stop there. In August 2018, Greg Nicotero, famous for his special effects work on The Walking Dead, joined the project. He had even worked on the original 1997 Spawn movie, so this felt like a reunion. All signs pointed to McFarlane and Blumhouse aiming high. By 2019, though, McFarlane's determination to do things his way was becoming a challenge. In interviews, he doubled down on the idea that this wasn't going to be a typical superhero movie. There would be no witty one-liners or big spectacle. It would be a dark, heavy story closer to horror than anything else. The problem was that superhero films were bigger than ever, and convincing investors to back something so different was tough. In fact, McFarlane admitted that he was ready to walk away if people tried to make him compromise too much. He explained that while the money was there, everyone had their own idea of what Spawn should be, and he wasn't going to change his script too much just to please investors. That same year, he also revealed a surprising detail. Spawn himself wouldn't actually appear all that much in the first movie. Instead, he'd act more like a background boogeyman, only stepping fully into the spotlight in a potential sequel. Not exactly what fans might have expected, but McFarlane seemed dead set on this approach. Then 2020 hit, and with it came the pandemic. Hollywood basically shut down for months, and Spawn's progress slowed way down. To make matters worse, Jamie Foxx quietly left the project around that time. Still, McFarlane remained optimistic, pointing to the success of Joker as proof that dark, character-driven comic book movies could succeed. He even said that the industry seemed more open to Spawn than it had been before. By August, he hinted that big-name talent was joining the team, though he kept details vague. In 2021, while the movie was stuck, the comics were doing the opposite. Image announced Spawn's Universe, an expansion that introduced spin-offs like Gunslinger Spawn and King Spawn. It showed the characters still had tons of potential, but the film itself was barely moving. McFarlane teased that there had been new hires and designs, and Greg Nicotero said the project was meant to feel like the animated series crossed with a David Fincher film. But in August, Brian Tucker was officially brought on to write the script, replacing McFarlane as lead writer. That was one of the first signs McFarlane was letting go of some control. By 2022, it felt like the movie was stuck in quicksand. McFarlane kept saying something big was about to happen, but nothing really did. He even floated the idea of a streaming series, though he wasn't convinced it would work. In August, Jamie Foxx once again teased his possible involvement, hinting at the costume designs McFarlane was cooking up. But then in October, 3 new writers, Scott Silver, Malcolm Spellman, and Matt Mixon, were hired to rework the script. That was unusual, and it showed the project was shifting again, with McFarlane giving up even more control. 2023 brought more twists. By then, McFarlane admitted that his original low-budget plan was no longer possible. With big names attached, the budget had to grow. Jason Blum even predicted that Spawn could finally hit theaters in 2025, but then came the writers and actors strikes, which froze the project yet again. Work on the script came to a complete stop. In 2024, there was still talk, but no real movement. Blum said that Scott Silver wanted to make Spawn feel different and dangerous, but what that meant wasn't clear. McFarlane expressed confidence, pointing to the success of Deadpool and Wolverine as proof that audiences wanted bold, R-rated comic book films. Blumhouse even posted what looked like an official script cover with the title King Spawn on Instagram, though it later turned out to be just a working title. That move left fans scratching their heads. Why tease it if it wasn't the real deal? Now we're in 2025, and where does that leave Spawn? Honestly, things are pretty much where they've been for years. McFarlane insists the project is alive and kicking, but there's still no studio, no production start date, and no release window. The one bit of fresh news is that they've apparently reached out to an A-list director, and contracts might be signed soon. McFarlane himself has stepped back from directing, which is a huge shift from his original vision. So after nearly a decade of promises, rewrites, and setbacks, Spawn is still floating in development hell. The difference now is that McFarlane seems willing to hand over the reins, at least to some degree, which might actually be what's needed to finally get the movie made. But until cameras roll, Spawn remains one of those projects that fans talk about but still can't see. And that's that for today's video. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one.